This is the second video for the Unit 2 focus session, and this one is on the content of the exam. So the first section is on problems, 1919 to 1923, and if we start up at the top, you can see that the end of the war causes lots of problems for Germany. Why? Well, the Kaiser is gone, so they've gone from having almost a dictator to having nobody there in charge, so there is a power vacuum, there's space at the top. Germany, expected to win, has spent a lot of money on the war and is now bankrupt, and that's causing lots of economic problems. There is violence on the street, there is political chaos, social chaos and economic chaos. Soldiers returning from the front have still got their weapons, there's not enough jobs, and they are struggling with inflation. And there's an awful lot of poverty, starvation, health issues. So there's not a stable Germany for the soldiers to return to at the end of the First World War. The next set of problems come about because of the Treaty of Versailles. Germany is blamed for starting the war. Clause 231, the War Guilt Clause, basically holds every German morally responsible for starting the war, and the Germans think this is totally unfair. But the Treaty of Versailles is a diktat. Sign it or be invaded, and with the possibility of the war starting again. So they are blamed. Because they are blamed, they can be charged reparations, compensation for repairing all the damage that has been caused. Well, the country is nearly bankrupt, it can't afford reparations. But France in particular wants them to pay crippling reparations so they cannot be a threat again. The reparations amount is later set at £6.6 billion or £6,600 million. It's the same amount. Their armed forces are reduced, 100,000 in the army, 15,000 sailors, no air force, no submarines, no conscription, no armed forces in the Rhineland. All of this is to reduce the threat that Germany poses. And finally, the territorial changes. Its empire is taken from Germany, and they lose key areas of land, like the Saarland for 15 years, full of raw materials that they lose. Eupen and Malmedy goes back to Belgium. Alsace and Lorraine goes back to France. North Schleswig to Denmark. Germany is split in two by the Polish corridor. They're losing their population, they're losing access to raw materials. This is all going to have economic and political and social impacts. So the Kaiser is gone. The politicians are now writing a new constitution. They do this in Weimar, so Germany is known as Weimar Germany. It's very democratic. Men and women over the age of 20 can vote. Well, that's a total change to the previous system, so it's going to take some getting used to. They have a president. Now, the president has the power to use Article 48. In an emergency, they can take over, and they don't have to put laws before the MPs, or the deputies as they're called. They can just pass laws by emergency decree. Now, that's supposed to be a safety valve in case there's any big problems, but it could be abused, that power. The votes are going to be counted by proportional representation. This means lots of small parties can get MPs or deputies into the Reichstag, but it makes it very, very difficult for one party to gain a majority. So this leads to coalition governments who are forced to cooperate and compromise with each other, and that doesn't always work. The next one, there are violent uprisings against all these changes. So the Spartacists in January 1919, the communists try and take over. 100,000 armed Spartacists try and take over Berlin. They want communism in Germany, not this new democracy. The new government has to rely on the Freikorps to stop them because they don't trust the German army. Then the Freikorps themselves under Dr. Kapp, these are right-wing ex-soldiers who've been roaming the streets with their weapons still. They try and overthrow the Weimar government in 1920 because under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, there's only 100,000 men allowed in the army, and they're told, go home. So they try and take over Berlin to get rid of the new government and bring in a more right-wing alternative, perhaps even the Kaiser again. Now, they are defeated by the government ordering the people in Berlin to go on strike, a general strike, so nothing runs in the city. No electricity, no communications, nothing. Now that's a sign that perhaps the people are willing to give this new Weimar government a chance, because it works and Dr. Kapp fails. The final putsch or uprising of the Nazis in 1923 in Munich, and again that is a failure, and we'll be looking at that on the next couple of slides. And overall, very dangerous time for politicians. There's 376 political murders, so you can see how unstable the situation is. And finally, in that 1923 period, the occupation of the Ruhr, and this links to the Treaty of Versailles. France and Belgium invade the Ruhr, which is a heavily industrialised area of Germany, because Germany doesn't pay the reparations. The workers there go on passive resistance, and the government, in an attempt to deal with the situation, pay those striking workers and also pay for the reparations, decides to print more money. That reduces confidence in the currency. Due to the shortages across all of Germany, because there's no raw materials coming out of the Ruhr to go to other factories in Germany, and shortages due to the lack of trade internationally, it leads to hyperinflation. Huge amounts of suffering. People cannot afford the basics to stay alive. People lose their savings. The middle classes lose their savings. Things are not looking good. So, Stresemann and recovery. How does he solve hyperinflation? Well, first of all, he introduces a new currency called the Rentenmark. So he gets rid of the old currency, he calls it back in, it's destroyed, and he replaces it with a new currency that's put under the control of a new Reichsbank. And this brings prices down and begins to stabilise the currency. He tells the striking workers to go back to work, so he ends passive resistance. So he's got to get those factories going again to try and get industry going again. And this results in stability. However, many people feel angered that he seems to have been given in to the French and the Belgian governments, particularly right-wing groups, which is why Hitler and the Nazis attempt the Munich Putsch when they do in 1923. So Stresemann at that point was Chancellor. Because of anger, shall we say, at how he dealt with this situation, this crisis, even though he did solve it, he becomes Foreign Minister. So the next focus is on how he improved international relations. So the first part of this is the Dawes Plan. Now, the Dawes Plan changes the reparations bill, or repayment, to affordable annual payment. So there's more flexibility there. And it also promises US investment. And that is what is needed to kickstart the German industry, the German economy again. Because of the Dawes Plan, the French agreed to leave the Ruhr. So again, that makes it much easier to get the economy going, because they're able to access the raw materials and machinery in the Ruhr. And the result of this is that output improves massively, employment goes up, and taxation revenues increase for the government. Then there's the Locarno Pact. This is between France and Belgium and Germany. They agree the 1919 border drawn up by the Treaty of Versailles, and it also states that Allied troops will leave the Rhineland. The Rhineland is still demilitarised, but it's not going to be patrolled. And they agree to open talks for the Treaty of Versailles. So this is showing how relationships are improving. So the League of Nations, Germany joins the Council in 1926. The Council makes the most important decisions, and the international reputation of Germany really improves. With increased trust becomes things like better trading. Now, the Kellogg-Briand Pact of 1928 was signed by 65 nations, and they agree not to use war to solve their problems. Again, this is proving that Germany is a respectable member of the international community. And then we have, in 1929, the Young Plan. So this reduces the reparations from 6.6 billion to £2 billion, and gives them another 59 years to pay it. So this gives them a lot more flexibility in terms of planning the German economy. They're able to lower taxes and release spending power. But all the benefits from that are cut short by the Wall Street crash. All of the recovery is dependent on American money, and the Americans want their money back. This is exacerbated, this is made worse by the fact that Stresemann dies just before this happens. Okay, now, taking a step back, we've got to look at the Nazi Party in the 1920s, so the growth of the Nazis. Hitler's career before 1919, well, he was in the German army and won the Iron Cross for bravery. When he leaves the army, he spies on and then joins the German Workers' Party. Now, he very quickly becomes involved, and he begins to suggest ideas like changing its name, so he adds National Socialist German Workers' Party to it, introduces the swastika, which gives them a clear identity, the salute. He encourages them to buy a newspaper to spread their ideas, and in 1921 he becomes leader. They write the 25-point plan, which includes things like scrapping the Treaty of Versailles, expanding Germany, denying Jews of German citizenship. He sets up the SA to provide party security. And the next big event with the Nazis is the Munich Putsch of 1923. They want to take advantage of hyperinflation and anger towards the Weimar government, and they're also aware that having the support of somebody like General Ludendorff, who was in charge of the German army during the First World War, will be a major benefit. They try and start a revolution in a German beer hall where the local Bavarian parliament is meeting. But when they leave the beer hall in an attempt to march on Munich and then on Berlin, their plans have been released to the police and they are stopped. Hitler is put on trial, so the putsch itself fails, but through the trial he's able to publicise his opinions. He gets a lenient sentence in prison, writes Mein Kampf, and makes some crucial decisions. The key one being that he's going to win power legally. And when he's released in 1924, in that election, the Nazis win 32 seats. So his long-term aim is to destroy democracy from the inside by winning power democratically and then dismantling democracy. After this point, though, the Nazis really struggle. Stresemann is doing a really, really good job. But the Nazis don't just accept that. They begin to reorganise the party, so they set up the Gaus to spread the Nazi message across all areas of Germany, not just the southeast. They set up the SS. They get money from big businesses who are prepared to donate because they're scared of the communists, and Goebbels is in charge of propaganda. Now, the key turning point is the Wall Street crash. That creates all the problems that the Nazis can take advantage of. Don't underestimate the appeal of Hitler. He's a brilliant speaker and plays on the fear of communism, which means many of the middle classes and the big business owners are prepared to listen to him and support him. Do remember that many of the workers are attracted to communism. They're not his core group of voters. The promises he makes are very clear. He's going to provide work, bread, restore Germany's reputation, destroy the Treaty of Versailles, destroy communism. And he's helped in this process by the failure of Weimar politicians such as Brüning, von Papen and Schleicher, who are constantly relying on Hindenburg, President Hindenburg, using emergency decrees, which makes democracy look like a failure. Okay, so the Nazi dictatorship. Hitler was appointed as Chancellor with von Papen as Vice-Chancellor, and he then sets about destroying democracy. So the first thing that happens is the Reichstag fire, probably set up by the Nazis but blamed on the communists. And Hitler's able to persuade President Hindenburg that Germany is under real threat from the communists. So he passes an emergency decree, the Decree for the Protection of the People and the State, which gives the Nazis emergency powers to round up political opposition who might be a threat to the security of the country, close down their newspapers, stop them from meeting. When the election of 33 happens, he doesn't gain a majority, but he joins with other nationalists, so he does, and he bans the communists from entering the Reichstag. He passes the Enabling Act. This enables him to do a variety of things, because essentially it says that Hitler can pass laws for the next 4 years without putting those laws before the Reichstag for a vote. So he's shutting down opposition. So he bans other parties, only the Nazis are allowed. He bans trade unions. He bans the 18 local parliaments so that there's no challenge to his authority on a local level. In the Night of the Long Knives, the SA is destroyed by the SS, so he's even getting rid of internal threats. When Hindenburg dies, he combines the role of president and chancellor and calls himself Führer. He sets up the police state in order to control the people. So you have the Gestapo, the secret police, you have the SS, the concentration camps. He persecutes the Catholic and the Protestant churches. He's in control of the legal system and the judges. Alongside this goes censorship and propaganda. So he censors the information people have access to, and he promotes endlessly Nazi ideas. So all radio stations are controlled by the Nazis. There's no free press, all newspapers are controlled. The cinemas, whenever you go to see a film, all of which are approved by the Nazis, you have to sit through a 45-minute newsreel. There's posters everywhere. There's rallies, amazing rallies on a huge scale with all the uniforms, the music, candlelit parades. Sport, he takes advantage of the Berlin Olympics. And culture and the arts, all musicians, poets, artists, dancers have to belong to the Reich Chamber of Culture if they're going to continue having their art work seen in public or doing performances. Domestic policies, okay? Young people are the future. If you can get them, then the Nazi Reich could last for 1,000 years. So at school, the curriculum is heavily controlled. The boys are designed to go into the army for that struggle in the future, and the girls are taught to be wives and mothers. There's a lot of focus on health and fitness, but they're also doing new lessons like race studies and eugenics to get across the ideas of the Aryan race. All teachers have to agree to these ideas and be part of the Nazi Teachers League. The Hitler Youth and the League for German Maidens, again, get those young people away from their parents to allow them to be indoctrinated with the ideas of Nazism. Women are expected to leave their jobs. They're expected to stay at home, to be married, to be having children. They pass the law for the encouragement of marriage. They provide loans that don't have to be repaid if you have 4 children, and they provide the Mother's Cross to reward those who have lots of children. Women's opportunities, freedoms are restricted. They're not expected to take part in politics or pursue a formal education at university level. And the persecution of minorities. Hitler's belief in the Aryan race being superior is at the heart of all of this. He starts off with an economic boycott of Jewish businesses, intimidating people who dare to shop in those places. He then passes the Nuremberg laws, which strip Jews of German citizenship, which forbids Jews from marrying Germans. These are all about restricting Jewish rights. Key turning point is Kristallnacht, when Jews are directly attacked and the synagogues are burnt down and the Jews are blamed. And then following that, you get the Jews registering their possessions and being forced into ghettos because Hitler wants to force them out of the country. Now, they are clearly being scapegoated. Some Germans are being brainwashed into believing all of this due to all the propaganda that they're being exposed to, and some are just too scared to speak out. And gypsies, homosexuals and disabled people also face persecution for similar reasons. The Nuremberg laws apply to gypsies as well, and homosexuals don't fit this idea of a traditional society that men and women producing children, and disabled people aren't contributing to society and they're costing a lot. Okay. Now, Nazi domestic policies. You have got the key issue that Hitler does solve the unemployment problem, sets up the National Labour Service. So the young people who are out building the motorways, the public buildings, wearing a uniform, they're off the streets and they're doing something positive. Rearmament. The army goes from 100,000 to 900,000. The Air Force is started again. Or knock-on effect for all those people who are making uniforms for them, making all the equipment, the tanks and the aeroplanes and the submarines. He reintroduces conscription. He's removing women and Jews from their jobs, so that frees up jobs as well. He, generally speaking, seems to bring about an improvement in the standard of living. So in the Labour Front, which is the Nazi trade union, there seems to be minimum standards expected from employers, but this is all to do with just getting the workforce as productive as possible. Strength through joy is created